Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gee Whiz Onboarding Webinar number 3, Adapting and Individualizing Gee Whiz. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you've already viewed our onboarding number 1 and number 2 webinars. Number 3 or number 4 will obviously be the last one in this series, which will be available shortly, and you should watch next. But this one's about adapting and individualizing Gee Whiz. So I'm going to go over quickly what our format's going to be for this quick 30-minute, hopefully, webinar. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the slide that shows what we're going to cover. So during this webinar, we're going to go over the tools that are included in the Gee Whiz curriculum to help you individualize. We are also going to show you how you can document your individualizations within the curriculum. We know for those of you working at higher star levels, this is really important to be able to document, so we have a tool to help you do that. And we're also going to go through where you can find information about anecdotal notes, reflections, and individualization on the Gee Whiz website. In fact, I'm going to be using our user's guide, the section on individualization, as I go through this short webinar with you. This is a component that is always available to everyone on our website. I'll show you where to get to it, but that's going to be the tool I will use to work through some of this information. So hopefully you will find this helpful. If after the webinar is over, you have any questions regarding the curriculum, please reach out to me at bsmith@geewizeducation.com. If you have any questions related to your account, you can reach out to customer service at geewizeducation.com. And this slideshow will be part of the webinar, so you can always go back if you've forgotten what those emails are and look at the webinar to see where you need to go for different types of questions. All right, so bear with me one second, and I'm going to go to our website. So I am now at geewizeducation.com. This is our website where the curriculum lives, all of our support materials live. There's a lot of free resources here, so please be sure to spend some time digging around, especially if you're new to Gee Whiz, because we have a lot of resources on our site to help you. But today what we're going to do is we're going to go about the curriculum and we're going to go to our user's guide. And I've mentioned this in the earlier onboarding webinars, but this is a really important document. It has a ton of information about the curriculum, about the developmental areas we address, about your role, about meeting the needs of children with, say, disabilities, linguistic and cultural differences. It also has a whole section on the philosophy and research behind the curriculum. But today in onboarding number 3, we're going to spend time in this section, individualization and authentic assessment. So this is a very, very important topic because as you all know, no 2-year-olds are the same, no 3-year-olds are the same. Children are very unique and very different. So when you're using the Gee Whiz curriculum, it's important for you to also think about each child, their individual interests and their individual needs. So this webinar is going to help you see the tools we've included in the curriculum to get you started, but there'll be some work obviously you have to do on your own. I mean, we obviously don't know the children in your group. You do, you know them best. And so this is going to be a webinar that will help you think about, okay, how can I individualize for the children in my group? So this section starts with what we view as a 5-step approach to individualization, which is the first part of it is going to be you have to observe. Then you reflect on what you observe. You plan based on those reflections. You do the activities you have planned, and then you reflect again to see how things worked. So it's like a circle. It just keeps going round and round and round and round. And this would be true for every child. You know, you're going to be doing this with each child, especially as they go from being you're a family child care provider from being an infant to a school age child. A lot of development is going to take place. There's a lot of individualization that's going to take place as well. So let's look at each of those 5 steps. The first one is observing and recording. We have a tool called our Observe and Reflect grid, which we've included with each of your units as a downloadable PDF. We'll see that here in a few minutes, but basically you can print out as many copies of that as you need to record your observations and your reflections and your plans based on those reflections. It's really important, and we'll talk about this in a second, but it's really important when you think about observing that you're doing just that. You're not necessarily thinking about what you think you see, it's what you actually see. So view yourself as like a camera or a excuse me, a video camera where you're just recording. As I always say when I do training on this, it's just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. So think about it that way, just the facts. Then in the second step, excuse me, you're going to reflect on those observations. This is when you put your 2 cents in. This is when you think about what you just observed and what does it mean? What did you learn from what you just observed? That's your reflection. Based on those reflections, you plan. And we have a tool to help you do that as well called our Individualization Web. You plan activities based on what you've just observed and what you have learned or gleaned from that observation, and you plan activities for that particular child based on that. And then we move on to the next step, which is do. Whatever activity you plan, you're going to do it. And while you're doing it, you're going to be observing and taking notes and writing things down because as the second and the last step of the circle, you're going to reflect again about what you just learned. Okay, and guess what? After you do all 5 of those, the next time you observe, or even within that observation, or based on whatever you were observing, that might start all over again. Okay, so it's a 5-step process. And we have tools to help you with all of this. So I'm going to keep on going and we're going to talk a little bit about anecdotal notes. I could spend hours on anecdotal notes, but this is the one page of the document that explains what it is, why they're important, what does it look like. An anecdotal note, like I just said, is just the facts. It's what you observe. It's what you see. It's what you hear. It's not what you think you see. It's not what you think you hear. It's what you actually see and actually hear. Normally, it also includes a brief description of the setting. Are you inside? Are you outside? Are you at the art table? Are you in the block center? Where are you? Are you at mealtime? Are you washing hands? Is it nap time? And then a summary of what happened. Again, what you see, what you hear. Direct quotes. If the children are talking within themselves or between themselves and you're observing, you might want to write down some direct quotes. And again, only the facts. So here's an example of Thomas and Jose who are playing side by side in the block area. Okay, that is where they are. Thomas has a stack of 5 plastic blocks in front of him. He picks up another block and puts it on top of the stack. The stack wobbles slightly. Thomas watches the stack, and when it stops wobbling, he smiles and says to Jose, "Look how tall my stack of blocks is now." Jose nods his head and picks up a block and puts it on top of another one. The block falls off. Jose bends his head downward toward the ground. Okay, exactly what happened, exactly what was seen, exactly what was heard, not what we think we saw and we heard. That comes next, but what we actually saw and what actually happened. Now you go on to the reflection. The reflection is what you gleaned or what you learned from that observation. What does it tell you about, in this case, Thomas and Jose? Here's what a strong reflection of that same situation might look like. Thomas appears to have strong fine motor control because he was able to stack 6 blocks without difficulty. He also appeared to be quite proud of his accomplishment as he spoke to Jose. His expressive language skills reflect his ability to form complete sentences without hesitation. That's what I learned, or that's what this person learned by recording that observation about Thomas. Now, about Jose. Jose struggled to stack 2 blocks without them falling. His fine motor skills are still developing in this area. In addition, he appears to be frustrated or upset when his blocks fell down. Okay, that's what you learned. All right, so the next step of this would be logically to plan activities based on what you learned about Thomas and Jose. For Thomas, obviously his fine motor control skills are quite well developed. Jose, on the other hand, seems to be still working on developing fine motor skills. So that just tells you with Jose, you might want to plan some more activities related to fine motor control. But with Thomas, he seems to have that under control, especially as that relates to blocks. Now, Thomas, if you observed him using a pair of scissors, it might be a whole different situation because fine motor skills are used differently in different situations. But with regard to blocks, he seems to have a fairly good handle on how to stack blocks without too much trouble, and he seems proud of his accomplishments. So it's what you've learned, and then you plan based on that. Then you're going to, let's say you plan some activities for Jose related to fine motor. You would go back and do the whole process all over again. All right. So we have some tools in the curriculum, which I'm going to come back to, but I want to pop ahead to the observe and reflect grid. This is again included with each unit. You can print as many copies as this as you would like to. Normally with materials from the curriculum, like the family letter or the make it sheets, we ask that you only print up to 12 copies, but this one is an exception. You can print as many of these as you need to. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to fill this out with the child's name, the date and the time you're doing the observation, the child, your name, child's name, their age in years and months, and the setting where they are. And then here's where you're going to record exactly what you see in here. And then when you scroll down, this is where you're going to write your reflection about what you learned by what you just observed. And then here you're going to also talk about the developmental areas and what you're going to be planning for the child based on what you observed. We've completed one for you to give you an idea of what it might look like. So just take a second and you can read through here on your own. I'm not going to read this all out to you, but it's an example of what you might write for an observation. And then I'm going to scroll down in just a second and you can look at what was written for the reflection. I want to give you just a second to look at that. All right, now I'm going to scroll down a bit and you'll see the reflection is right here. And then you'll see what you're going to be planning or what this person has planned based on what they've observed and the reflections that they've had. Okay. Again, we could spend hours on anecdotal notes and reflections, and it does take quite a while to get used to writing an anecdotal note that doesn't have your opinion in it. Again, just think of it as you're just recording the facts, what you see, what you hear. All right, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about our individualization web. So I want to pop back up here real quick. So our individualization web is this form right here. It's included with each of our units, and it is a tool that you can use to help you individualize the unit that you're doing. So it's a way for you to integrate a child's interests into your unit, which is super important. All children have different interests. So we created this individualization web as a tool to help you do just that. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to show you a completed one. Whoops, excuse me, that's the observe and reflect. They look a lot alike. All right, here's an individualization web. We do have a blank one that is available also as part of the user's guide, and there's one specific to the units that we're doing that's included with each unit. This one's blank, so you can, if you're doing your own unit, you can use that individualization web. But here's an example. So in this example, Francisco has an interest in vehicles, and the Gee Whiz unit that we're doing is called I Am Special. All right, so we're going to start by asking the child a question. And the question is, what would you like to learn about? And you fill in the blank, what their interest is. Dinosaurs, vehicles, trucks, could be anything, could be butterflies, could be caterpillars. I mean, children have all kinds of interests, whatever they're interested in. And then Francisco's responses you would write down here because that's what he wants to learn about that, his area of interest. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take that information, you're going to plan some activities. You're going to try to plan activities related to vehicles that integrate with our unit, I Am Special. All right, so let's say we're doing a unit on community helpers, and maybe you have a child that's really interested in dogs, right? So a natural integration there is obviously veterinarians, right? You could integrate a series of activities related to veterinarians that also encompass dogs or dog trainers. There are a lot of people out there right now that's a very big field is training. So that could be another area of a community helper. Dog walkers, pet sitters. There's so many different ways you can integrate those two things together. So you plan some activities, and then at the end, after you've done some of them, you write a reflection. How did it go? Did Francisco enjoy the activities you had planned? Were there some he liked more than others? Why do you think that is? This helps you to evaluate whether or not what you planned met up with Francisco's interest in vehicles, but also helped you integrate it in with your unit. So it's really important to reflect. So again, there's a individualization web included with each unit, but you can also use our blank one right here if you're doing a unit of your own. And you can then create your own unit with your own topics and do the same thing. So that's our individualization web. The other part and piece we have for individualization is the one I mentioned a minute ago about documenting your individualization, and this is called our customized individualized lesson planning sheet. I know this is really small here. I'm just going to brush on it here, and we're actually going to look at one that's filled out. But basically what it allows you to do is it allows you to document how you're going to individualize the activities in the Gee Whiz curriculum for each of the children in your group. Now, some of them you may need, some activities you may need to individualize, others you may not, and it really depends on the children in your group. But this tool is available both in a Word document where you can type in the boxes or a PDF document where you can print it out and write. That is totally up to you, whichever you feel like would work best for you. But what I'm going to do in a second here is I'm going to leave this section of the user's guide and I'm going to go into our component slide deck so I can show you what this might look like when you fill it out. This is a very powerful tool to help you document individualizations as you do each unit. So I'm going to get out of here, and under that same tab about the curriculum, I'm going to go to components. And I'm going to click to open my slide deck. And I'm going to scroll down for a second here to right here. All right, so basically there's going to be a list of the experiences that are planned in the Gee Whiz unit on the left. There's going to be space for you to add each child's name and write the individualizations or type them if you're using a Word document on the right, up to 6 children. So if you have more than 6 children, you'll just need to print out 2 copies or use 2 copies of this document. But basically, it enables you to plan those individualizations and document them. So particularly, like I said, if you're working for the higher level star levels, you have a record of how you've individualized the Gee Whiz curriculum for the children in your group. So here's an example of what it might look like. So what we have over here is always at the top, you have what the unit title is. You'll fill in the dates the unit was taught and you'll fill in your name. Here you'll fill in the children's name. So I only have 3 going across here because I wanted this to be large enough that you could actually see it. But you would have 6 on the actual sheet, so for 6 children. Then down the left-hand side, you have a list of the activities that are planned for the day. So our exploring together was who are my friends. The first center, our small group experience was find your name, then fun with friends, and your infant experience was I see a friend. So what I did when I filled it out as a sample is I abbreviated these titles of these activities because I didn't want to write them out. So for instance, for who are my friends, I abbreviated that to WAMF. And for find your name game, I abbreviated that to FYNG. So you can abbreviate it if you want. You can do it however you want. But what I did is I then wrote down exactly how I was going to adapt or individualize this experience for Trina. So for Trina, I'm going to have her hold the I'm going to have Trina hold the ball and help her roll. I'm going to hold Trina, excuse me, and help her roll the ball because maybe Trina has a hard time sitting still alone, right? Then for Jamie, during the Who Are My Friends, I'm going to make sure to use a large ball that's easier for Jamie to handle. This must mean that Jamie is working on fine motor control. And for Raul, I'm going to have him assume a leadership role by inviting him to help lead the song because Raul obviously is more advanced. And then I did the same thing for Find Your Name, right? And if I had any infants, then I would have another child's name. And if the infant, you might just have 1 adaptation or 2 adaptations. And again, you might not have an adaptation for every single activity we have every day. In fact, you probably will not. But this was to give you some idea what those adaptations might look like based on the children in your group, based on their developmental levels and what they're working on and the skills they're attempting to develop. And again, it's a tool that will help you document all of this as you are moving up through the star levels in your state if that's something you're working on. So customized individualized lesson plan sheet. It is a component that is included in each Gee Whiz unit. So you have one of these for every unit that we do, and it will definitely help you document those individualizations. Now, on top of all of that, we also help you adapt in the lesson plans. And I touched on this a little bit in our, it was in the second onboarding webinar, but I want to go back to our sample lesson plan again. And I'm going to click right here to open it up, and I will blow it up so we can look at this on the second page. So we talked a little bit about how we adapt and modify activities in the Gee Whiz units. And you'll see that in some of the experiences like this. where we have, for toddlers, 2s, young 3s in this case, and for older 3s, 4s, advanced preschoolers. Again, I would encourage you, as you're thinking about adaptations and individualizations, to read the entire activity and think about each child in your group and think about where they are developmentally. And think about, given the adaptations we've given you, will these work? Or do you need to adapt and individualize even further? Again, we cannot possibly know your children, and there are so many different developmental levels within, say, fine motor control, that only you are going to know the best way to adapt for your children. The important part is you think about it, right? Before you do the experience, you read it, you think about it, you think about each child, you think about, well, okay, well, how might I have to do this differently for Jose? Or how might I have to do this differently for Maria? Or are there additional materials I might need to gather for some of the children? So these are the kind of questions to ask yourself as you're planning your day. Again, we've done some of that work for you because you're going to see these adaptations in the lesson plans. But as I mentioned in the onboarding number 2, for instance, over here in this activity, banging on boxes, excuse me, we did not include adaptations because the children will naturally adapt it to their own developmental level and where they are. Now, that being said, let's say you have a child with banging on boxes that has limited fine motor control, has trouble with grasping things. Obviously, then you're going to want to have a thick-handled plastic or wooden spoon for them to hold on to. And let's say you don't. Let's say you just have a regular one. Well, one of the things you could do is take a sock, wrap it around the handle, use some tape to make that handle bigger and easier for them to hold. So sometimes you have to think a little bit about, okay, what can I use that I have around the house to make this easier for a child that maybe has a fine motor issue? So what the bottom line here is that any of these can be individualized and need to be individualized based on the children in your group, but only you know them. You will also see throughout the lesson plans, occasionally you'll see for ELL or DLL children who speak another language at home and are learning English, ways you can adapt. Google Translate is your friend. Use Google Translate to help you figure out how to say different words or different things in the child's home language and in English. By exposing them to both of those, you're helping them connect those dots, okay? So you will see tips on that throughout the lesson plans as well. There are also, when you're talking about individualization on our website, and I believe it is under educational resources for providers, yes it is, we have links for disabilities information that you might find very helpful from the CDC. We also have developmental checklists from the CDC that you might find helpful. These are available to anyone. You do not need to be a customer to access any of the things under this tab. I am not logged in. So under resources for providers, developmental checklists, and then developmental disabilities information, there's a lot of great information you might find helpful as you work to as you're working with children that you may need to adapt even more for based on their individual needs. Okay. So the bottom line is we have tools built into the curriculum to help you individualize. We have tools built in to help you gather the anecdotal notes that you will need then to plan some individualizations. And we hope that all of this will make it a little bit easier as you adapt and modify Gee Whiz as needed for the children in your group. You're going to find sometimes that there are activities that you don't need to adapt or individualize at all because they're set up such that the children can do them at a level that's appropriate for them without any adaptations. But there will be other ones that you will want to adapt, and you should adapt. Incorporating the children's interests is always important. So please use that individualization web to help you do just that. It will help you incorporate their interests into the unit, so you can still do the same unit, but you're incorporating interests from each individual child within that unit to make it more meaningful to them, because that's really, really important. So this webinar is being recorded, as I mentioned, and is part of our onboarding series. You will be able to find it under the Training and Support tab. You're going to go to Onboarding Training Webinars, and this is also where you're going to go to complete your post-assessment. So if you scroll down to webinar number 3, Adapting and Individualizing Gee Whiz, you're going to see a button where you can go back and watch this because we've covered a lot of content and you may want to go back and watch it just to refresh your memory from time to time. Perfectly fine. If you need my email, that's where you'll find it too, is in the recording. Then when you're ready, you're going to click this button to do the post-assessment. Post-assessment is just a 10-question quiz. It's not hard. You can do it as many times as you want. And then when you're ready, hit the submit button after you've answered all the questions. And pay attention because there will be a link, a PDF to a PDF that you want to either click on or block and copy. Sometimes Google gives it as a hot link where you can just click on the link. Other times you actually have to block and copy the link into another window, and then you can print it out for your certificate proving that you've done this training. So again, to get here, just to refresh your memory, I went under the training and support tab under onboarding training webinars, and I scrolled down to webinar number 3. And this is where you're going to click to do the post assessment and to get your certificate. After you've done that, you'll be ready for onboarding webinar number 4, which that one is going to be about Gee Whiz and assessment, another really important topic to cover. So we hope you found this helpful. Again, feel free to go back and watch it at another time. Feel free to explore our website for other resources. And thank you so much for joining us. Bye.